Welcome to the introduction to EdLeadS, the leadership program hosted by EduCity Malaysia. Today we're going to be looking at some of the elements that this project will offer you, and we're doing that with a group of guests that I have here with me. My name's Simon Evans, I'm a sports journalist with Reuters News Agency. Cecilia Pereira-Yates is the Managing Director of GB8. She's a Malaysian-born expert in international educational partnerships with a particular focus on links between British universities and Southeast Asian countries. David Horrocks is the Director of Sensible Soccer, an academic with a PhD in sports psychology and consultant head of research and development at Manchester United. Mike Phelan needs no introduction. He's the Assistant Manager of Manchester United, working alongside manager Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Previously, he was Sir Alex Ferguson's right-hand man during the most successful years in the club's rich history. Mike is chairman of Sensible Soccer. So Cecilia, perhaps you could tell us how this project with EduCity came about.
So EduCity is a regional education hub in Malaysia, situated in the southernmost state of Malaysia in Johor, and it hosts several universities and schools and colleges within the vicinity. And EduCity, because it hosts quite a number of UK universities there at the moment, you have Newcastle Medical School, Reading and Southampton universities, and you also have Marlborough College. The leaders of EduCity wanted very much to enhance the student experience. So in my working relationship with Malaysia, and also in my partnership with Sensible Soccer with David and Mike, I realized that there's an opportunity here to enhance the student experience and to help Malaysian students gain some practical knowledge from both Mike and David on how they can become much more employable. So EduCity came up with this new program, which is basically to help create more leaders from the student population in Malaysia, within the universities in Malaysia. And so they created this program called EdLeadS, and it's basically education, through education to create leaders for the future. And through the collaboration between Sensible Soccer and EduCity, we are bringing the pitch to the classroom for students to gain some of the key themes. So decision-making being one of them, growth mindset being one of them, communication, leadership. And those were the main kind of reasons how this partnership developed.
Dave, this course focuses on the growth mindset. Perhaps you could kick us off by talking about what exactly is the growth mindset?
Growth mindset. What growth mindset is, it has become a buzz term, really, in education, in industry and sport over recent years. And it is a concept that was founded by a lady called Professor Carol Dweck some 30 plus years ago now. And it originated through her inquisitiveness into students and failure. Why did they fail? And what she found is that if people had an attitude where they were fixed and their abilities were fixed, you're born with just certain limitations, then what you can achieve is set at a ceiling at birth. The growth mindset is where you believe that through effort, openness, work, perseverance, and trying several sort of strategies, you can develop, and the mind's malleable, and you can become better and grow as a person. So that's what growth mindset is, really, in summary.
I mean, I would imagine most people who've had a degree of success of any kind in their life have evolved some form of growth mindset. I mean, Mike, in your work, starting off as a footballer and then going into coaching, I mean, there's a lot of growth there. How have you approached that mindset?
Well, I think it starts with an idea. You know, we all have, as players and as coaches, we have ideas that we want to go on a journey with, you know, to see where that can take us. And in my case, you know, having a growth mindset means that I have an idea, I run it through my head, I converse with people, I read, I watch things, I listen, I talk to a lot of people about their thoughts And I think once you start communicating that way, people offer you certain, or they deliver to you some of the ways that you're thinking, you know, and then it's all about how do you manage those thoughts, where do you take them, and who do you give them to? And I think then you're opening yourself up to individuals to explore themselves, really, and I think that's an interesting journey to go on.
Cecilia, it seems a particularly important thing for young people, students, people looking to get involved in business or develop their leadership skills. Seems something essential for them to have.
Yeah, definitely. I think students nowadays, they go to university and they get an education, but it doesn't necessarily help them to become much more employable. So they lack in the soft skills. So learning and gaining experience, understanding what other people go through, and developing those skills will really help them to become much more employable. I think it just enhances what they've already got.
David, is there a spectrum really with the growth mindset? I mean, is it possible to be 100% in that mindset?
No, it's not. It's not a linear concept at all. And we're all a mix, in all honesty. You've got fixed mindset at this end and you've got growth mindset there. And people will fluctuate. And the further you can get here, then you're developing and you're growing. And you'll sort of get a bank of knowledge and it works for you. You'll use it. So you might say, I am then a growth mindset person. But we live in an evolutionary world. You look at mobile phones, you look at cars, you look at appliances we've got in houses. It moves, the world moves, and people have to move with it. It's people that have created this world. So you fluctuate. It's non-linear, but the most successful people are the ones, they change, they evolve, and they keep pushing and each time you drop back down to that fixed, they'll go again and stretch themselves a little bit further.
I think it's challenging, isn't it? It's the challenge of what do you want to do on a day-to-day basis, because I myself can sort of fit into a fixed mindset, but also a growth mindset. It depends. Absolutely. It depends what sort of environment you're in, and what are the people in there with you, alongside you, that are exploring new things. That's the challenge from a coaching point of view, different to a player's point of view. But players can educate coaches, as daft as it is as well, into a growth mindset because of their demands. They're all individual, yet they're a team as well. So when it comes to growth mindset, they are taking on board a lot of the coach's experiences and learning systems to try and put into practice themselves. So they want to grow with you, but they challenge you to grow as well at the same time. Because if you do stand still, they overtake you, or you haven't got sufficient education or sufficient quality to give to them to make them better. So you more or less try all the time to learn something every day and challenge those people or teams or players to learn one thing different a day.
You're out your comfort zone is right, and a lot of academics will say that learning takes place when you're outside that comfort zone. There's a degree of pressure to learning and stretching yourself, and that is how you will grow. It doesn't always feel nice, don't get me wrong, but that is part of the journey, and it's quite normal. People will sort of feel, I'm not quite sure why I'm here, this is right for me, it's hard. It is hard. Yeah,
winning and losing are two different things, but they give you two different challenges. You sometimes don't explore why you're winning enough, and you certainly explore a lot more when you're losing a lot, if that makes sense. But you do dig a little bit deeper when, you've come against certain barriers that aren't taking you to where you want to go. So you explore a little bit deeper and you use all those skills that you've got to find a way to answer the questions you've got, be it through, like I say, communication, be it through listening to people, watching programs, just generally being around conversation, those sorts of things. Researching. There's a lot now, there's different skills in researching now for students than there was when I was around. It was mainly books or you had conversations. Now you can do it at the touch of a button. You can find things, and then you've got to work out, is that truthful or not, because there's a lot of it out there. So there's a lot more detail now you can find than you could before. But I personally when it comes to growth mindset, I like conversation. I like sitting with people. I don't particularly like the comfort of doing phone calls and things like that, because I want to see body language and I want to see enthusiasm, and I want to feel that, and that generates my own enthusiasm, being around people. And I think people make it work better than sitting in front of a computer all the time. You have to, in some ways, it's uncomfortable, but you have to find a comfort in doing these sorts of things, or sitting with somebody that you're a little bit nervous of or not sure of, but asking those pertinent questions that give you an insight into the answer. You know, because I don't have all the answers. I don't think Dave has all the answers. Cecilia doesn't. But together we can form an answer that can help an individual. It's
interesting, like, to the layman, in football terms especially, you hear people talk about, oh, he's a natural talent, or he's worked hard at his game to get where he is now. That is a sort of alternative. But I would imagine in reality, neither is enough, is it?
It's an age-old argument, nature, nurture. There are certain things where nature will give you an advantage. I mean, you're 6'5", I'm 5'6", so the likelihood of you being a basketball player is far higher. The likelihood of me being a jockey is far higher than you. So that's where nature comes in, and it will give you physical characteristics that are particularly applicable in sport. In academia, you might say we're all given the same opportunities. We go to school at 4 years of age. You go through your first school, your secondary school, on to further education. And it's, for want of a better way of putting it, a level playing field. And the opportunity is there for all to be able to engage in education, engage in research, engage in self-development and push yourself. So I think that sector in particular, the education sector, is a growth mindset sector. That is one where the sky's your limit. You can achieve what you wish to achieve.
Yeah, through effort. You've got to put the effort in. You've got to put the work in order to achieve, I think. But it is open to anybody to do that. And then it's your interpretation of where you want to go with it, how you interpret, you know, what somebody's saying, what somebody's showing you. Does it fit into your way of thinking? You know, does it challenge you enough to delve deeper? I think that's something that I've learned along the way, because my approach as a football player is completely different, or was completely different, to being a football coach. Completely different now, because I have to find a lot more tools to have at my disposal in order to deliver something to the player than I really looked for when I was a player. I just played. I trained hard, I worked hard, and then I played. And I followed instructions that were there at the time. If you go into coaching and you go into that field of learning, it's huge, it's so open, but then it's finding the information and how do you translate that back? How do you deliver it back? It's really important. And I find it interesting because everybody is different, and I'm sure Cecilia will, and Dave, in the student environment, everybody's an individual with a different learning skill. And it's tapping into that and trying to find a way to be able to deliver what I know to them and make it interesting enough for them to own it, take it away and work with it, find a way for themselves.
You've got your person and your actions. I mean, we've known each other for a while, Simon, and in the student population, everyone's not going to go into football, but you're a journalist.
Right.
Now, I know this, and I'm going to flip it and ask you, how did you get there? How did you get to Reuters? How did your career start? What have you done?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting to say about getting out of your comfort zone, because I quite literally and physically did that. When I finished university and didn't get straight into the career I wanted to, I moved to Hungary, Budapest, in 1993 as a 23-year-old and started there. And suddenly doors started opening just because I was in a certain place. But it also pushed me to learn really quickly some skills and learn from other people. And exactly what you're talking about those conversations, I was lucky enough to be around freelance journalists who were very experienced, who knew how to sell articles, knew how to build contacts, knew how to do the job, basically, and was able to learn from them. And that was an opportunity that was similar maybe to what you would get in an academic environment, but obviously informal and fast.
Which is pracademic, really. That's practical, which we're bringing more and more into the educational world.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to ask, those lessons from sport, as it were, football, I mean, it's something that in the United States, there's been a lot of books written with NFL coaches talk about lessons for business and so on, but this kind of applying ideas or experiences from sport into business and leadership skills, is that something that's quite new in Malaysia?
Yeah, I think people have always been interested in sport, but to take a course in sport has never been something that parents in Malaysia would have encouraged their child to do. Traditionally, it would always have been courses like accounting or law, you know, where they see that this is where you can get a really good career and you can get a good profession in it and a good lifestyle with it. But what I've realized through the years is through sport, you gain so many skills. You know, you learn to be resilient, you learn to, you develop your emotional intelligence. And these are transferable skills, which you can then bring into business. So doing a course in sports management, for example, or sports science doesn't necessarily mean you can't then work in a different environment, say, for example, in finance. So I feel that the approach that we're taking, basically bringing the pitch to the classroom, will help students to see all these other key skills and learn all these other key skills, which perhaps they wouldn't have had the exposure or the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, I mean, let's just delve a little bit into some of the areas within growth mindset that people will get to look into on this course. I mean, key one is obviously decision making. Dave, where do these things?
I mean, there are literally hundreds of aspects, and for this, in this particular case, for the EdLeadS programme, we're going to look at three, which are decision-making, communication and leadership. So decision-making per se, you have to make decisions to grow. That's a fact. And how are you going to make decisions in a growth mindset way? I think you look for evidence. You do a bit of research. So if someone asks you something or you're given a particular task, you can read, you can look, you can use digital platforms, find experienced people. But then, a little like Mick said in football, you soak that information up and you decide what to do with it. You form your own opinion from that. Because you've got what we call an evidence-based decision then, the likelihood of it being effective is higher. But I think one of the key things with growth mindset people, and this certainly happens in business, and I'll throw this back to Mick. I mean, I've read with interest Sir Alex Ferguson's autobiography, and I worked within Manchester United doing some of my PhD studies. So having had exposure to a lot of people at Manchester United, Sir Alex Ferguson crops up time and time again. And every time I ask someone about him, the one thing that comes out every single time is he made decisions. He makes decisions every day. They're not always right, but he makes decisions. I mean,
that's perfectly true. And you know, he sat at the top table really, and it was his role and responsibility to make the decisions. And you're perfectly right in that some of the decisions at the time are like, wow, where did that one come from? Or why has that decision been made? But what he did do really well, he made decisions because he understood the consequences of those decisions. And what I mean by that is, he would sometimes make a decision which he knew wouldn't totally fall into the right area of people's thinking. You know, they wouldn't necessarily go along with it to the point where they would probably object to it, but also they'd find a way through it. You know, it was quite, the challenges he threw in decision making were as great as actually making the decision. So he left those decisions with you. What
it's
you're going to do with them.
Cause and effect thing.
Yeah.
Anyone who's
exactly
making
that.
a decision, the first thing you must ask yourself, well, what do I want to happen here? What would I like the outcome to be?
You know, I can give you an example of that. And examples are when, say, we know we're a good team, we know we're playing well, and then we have a game where we're not playing well and we don't look fit enough. He would find a way to express that just by making a decision on, right, guys, those players didn't look fit to me in that match. That's how we lost the game. Now, what he's actually saying is, to all those people who are responsible for that, go and examine the reasons why he thinks that is the case. Now you can come back to him, and we did it numerous times where we would provide evidence that that was not the case, but it was the point he was making was, in his mind, you weren't doing, or you weren't efficient enough in your job that week, or you didn't find a way to make it happen. What are the reasons? There probably wasn't any, but he's thrown a challenge down to you to step up, to actually look back on it, reanalyze it, find a reason.
He's promoting a growth mindset.
He's promoting,
really.
yeah.
He's pushing down onto his staff and through the organisation this pressure and this thinking.
Saying, give me a reason why I'm thinking like that. Tell me that that's right or it's wrong.
He's also making people accountable.
And he's also saying, well, stand up and tell me, you know, find that reason. Am I right? Am I not?
Sometimes in sport, what might happen, they might not improve, but what will happen is they won't drop because of that pressure.
Yeah, we talk about keeping you on your toes and things like that. And, you know, you can call it whatever, you call it a fear or whatever, but there's nothing wrong with that feeling that you've let yourself down, or you haven't explored it enough, or you haven't expressed it well enough to people, and you've just taken a little backward or sideways step instead of being on the front foot and going for it. And I think that was, in all his management skills, he pushed you further forward all the time. What we've done today isn't good enough for tomorrow. It's got to be a bit more, a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more. And we all took on that role and that responsibility, and it was challenging, you know, to make the difference. But like I say, it's driven by the quality you're working with as well. Because I'm challenging Dave, Dave challenges me, Cecilia challenges us all. And then it could be somebody in the kitchen who's not preparing the food properly for the players, or has just took his eye off the game. That's a challenge for them. So everybody steps up that little bit more, and that is making sure we're all at our optimum all the time.
And some of the decisions might be wrong.
Yeah, definitely.
As well. But what that does, that then brings another decision to the table and another. So you're progressing. You're learning.
And that's
what
I talk about consequences. That's the reason. The consequence of that statement he made to everybody made us all wonder, aye, is he on my case? Does that mean that? Does that mean that? So the consequence is we all up our game a little bit.
If you make a wrong decision, but you've got a growth mindset environment, that wrong decision is actually taking you one step closer to the right decision.
But I also think that a lot of people are scared to make the wrong decision. So the fear of making a decision, rightly or wrongly, holds people back. So, you know, the need to understand that this is part of the process, and you almost have to have courage to make a decision.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, we in sport, in my sport, we're talking about £1 million worth of assets, you know, and that's what you're working with on a day-to-day basis, and your decision-making reflects that value in the market. So the more experience you've got, you hope you don't make as many decisions, but you will get the wrong one now and again. You will make the wrong one, but the point of making that wrong decision means you took that away next time and you learn from that so it doesn't come again. And believe you me, it is a circle of experiences, because, you know, it does come round again, that moment where you think, oh, I can remember 10 years ago. And in Sir Alex's case, he could remember that far back. You know, he could remember a game, a player, the actual score, what we did that week. He could remember, and he could relate that back and say, oh, I remember he did well in that, he didn't do so well in that. And that sticks in your mind for your next decision. You know, players like Ryan Giggs, instances of Ryan Giggs where 6 games away, we'd be talking about, we need Ryan Giggs for that game. But with 6 games to play before that, how are we going to manage that? How are we going to get him to that point? Well, he's not going to play in this game, but he's going to play in that one because he remembers that in that particular game against a team, he was outstanding more 9 times out of 10 in that game. So he worked on that principle of that's the game he likes to play in. We've got to make sure he's right for that. So the other games in between aren't as relevant as this big one. You know, and yeah, you take risks. That is a risk to take, but it's a manageable risk through experience and having that mindset and carrying that courage to do it, like you said.
The most public decision a football manager makes, I would imagine, is in the transfer market. That's where everyone picks it up in the newspaper. they all see it, they all ask themselves why have they done that and so on, recruitment. They're pretty public decisions for people in business as well. People find out who you've appointed and wonder why you did it and so on. He used to seem to have a habit of bringing in players after a successful season. And people are talking about that at the moment with Liverpool, aren't they, about whether Liverpool should add players to a successful squad. He used to do that though, didn't he?
Yeah, and also, you know, Manchester United as an establishment has to grow year on year. It has to grow all the time. It can't stand still. And it does push the boundaries, or should push the boundaries, as to where you want to go. And that's from a business point of view and from what you see as a sport. So everybody needs a new challenge. Everybody needs to not rest on the laurels, not rest on past success. You can't look backwards other than look backwards for the experience you got out of it. But you can't alter what's happened before you, but you can alter what's in front of you. So it's having that continuous thought process to make sure you grow year on year into what you expect to be.
You can look outside your organisation as well. And an example of what Mick's talking about there, in my studies, I was fortunate enough to do a case study with Gary Neville. And Gary said, it's not good enough for me to be the best right back at Manchester United. And I was taken aback. I thought, elaborate. He said, I watched all the others in the world, and at that particular time, it was Cafu. And he said, because I'm at a football club, they can buy him tomorrow. So it's no good me being the best right back at Manchester United. I've got to be better than him, or aspire to be. So that's the extreme growth mindset, thinking he's not only the best in his organisation, he's outside his organisation and looking best in class beyond that. He's thinking about his future, not just today and tomorrow.
And Mike, when we talk about the growth mindset, and the growth of a player developing his potential, and presumably everyone who walks in the door at Manchester United is seen as potential, or else they wouldn't be there. But I'm just thinking about the case of Cristiano Ronaldo, who people talk about what his attitude was towards training and to developing himself, and obviously he's had an incredible career. But what, during your time working with him, what did you see there in his mentality?
It's interesting because we talk about growth mindset, but you could also put the category of fixed mindset as well. And what I mean by he had a fixed mindset, because he wanted to be the best player in the world. That was fixed in his head. That was the one driving factor. The growth side of it was that he knew at the time when he came from Sporting Lisbon that he had a lot to learn in order to get him to that position of being the best in the world. But he also knew, and he had the growth mindset in him, to be able to say, well, my plan of action is going to be, I work at this, I work at that, I work on my strengths and my weaknesses, and it's going to take me a few years to get to where I want to go. But Manchester United is a fantastic opportunity for him to do that. And when you started working with him, the skills and the mentality that he had for such a young player was extraordinary, really, purely because of the drive and the work ethic that Ronaldo had. And he brought that to the table. And I touched a little bit on the challenge. The challenge for a coach was to make him understand what it took to be the best player in the world and give him the tools. You know, he had everything. It was just putting the jigsaw puzzle together for him, and we were the instruments of that. You know, we don't take the credit for creating Cristiano Ronaldo. Nobody should. He did that himself. But what he did do, work ethic, wanting to be the best, learning to be the best, and acquiring the skills that could turn him into the best footballer in the world. And when you see that develop, we were a stepping stone to his next stage, and then the next stage was Real Madrid, and then it went on, and he's still playing now at the highest possible level he can, and he's been doing that for years. So his, whatever you want to call it, growth mindset was the challenge. And every day challenging him, because he would challenge you to make that happen. But he had this work ethic, which was, you know, it was in other players, but he drove himself to this point of, no, my fixed mindset is, I want to be the best in the world. But my overall mindset is, there's a lot to do in order to get there. And he was willing to take on that challenge. And that is a credit to him, a real credit to him. And to Manchester United to helping him achieve it.
4 years ago, I saw him in the final of the Euros in France, when he got injured in the final and he came off, and then he takes his shin pads off, and he almost became the coach of the team, didn't he? He was walking around the technical area and the bench, he was giving instructions to players, but he sent a really strong signal to his teammates that somebody who gets accused of being very selfish was like not disappearing from the scene at all.
Yeah, I remember that really well, and that is part of his education along the way. But he gained confidence in being able to deliver that. You know, not everybody can do that, and not everybody can get it right when they're doing that. You know, it can seem a little bit false, but he showed the passion and what it meant. Obviously, because it's his country and because he was the captain of the country, and also probably that he felt as though maybe I can't produce my best because I'm injured at that moment in time. But there's another skill to him now, which is I can still play from the touchline. And that's what a coach is, really. I'm playing the game whilst the team's playing the game a little bit differently, but I'm still trying to kick every ball in the same way as I used to do, but I'm doing it sitting down now. And I think that's what Cristiano did at that moment in time. He knew what his attributes were to his team, both on the field and off it, and he portrayed that. And I think everybody picked up on that.
You've got the communication and the leadership. And if he's on the field, it's a well-known fact in football. You've only got the ball for, 3 minutes, something like that. And it's an hour and a half plus is the game. So a lot of what Ronaldo's doing, even when he's playing, is body language, communication, talking to teammates. And they have a trust in that because he's a great player. There's no doubt about that. When he's gone off, that team might have thought, we haven't got Ronaldo now. 2 minutes later, the same body language is there. He's on the side and he's talking, and they probably felt like he was playing. So you look at the communication and the leadership, it's still there.
Yeah. Bit of psychology as well in that.
One of the most fascinating things I've ever watched as a psychologist. I wasn't really watching the game anymore. You're just looking at the dugout and thinking.
I think the camera was at the time as well,
Yeah,
because
I think the coach sat down at one point.
It did get picked up on by the media and everything, but it just showed where he started to where he'd got to. He was at that moment where he had far more to give off the field in that moment in time than on it. But that's something he's processed and learned and understood that he could deliver that, and was given the chance to deliver it as well by his coach, which in itself
that's
is
a risk.
very, very...
He took a risk.
I was going to say, it might have been a bit riskier with certain other coaches we might have mentioned today.
Yeah, but that is something you're actually coaching. You want to coach that to get that out of them, to express themselves, because it matters. When it really matters, they do stand up. They do
You've got
come
two
out
great elite characteristics there. He's took a risk to do that because it's not his role and responsibility in the defined hierarchy. But the coach has thought, I'll let him go. I'll sit down here because this is working.
Because it can be interpreted differently. It can be interpreted as a weakness, not a strength, a weakness to the coach. But if you're a clever coach and a good coach and an understanding coach, it's actually a strength of a coach to allow it, if it's correct what he's doing, to allow that to happen, because it generates an unbelievable amount of adrenaline.
And you'll see this in business, in the creative industry, in the journalistic industry that you're in. There must be great leaders who just say, write that story.
Oh, yeah.
Or design that advertising campaign, because I believe in you.
Yep, absolutely. No, I remember my first World Cup I did in 1998. My editor was a man of very, very few words, and after 2 weeks out in the field covering Croatia and their run, which was a great story to do, I turned up and I thought, right, I wonder what sort of review I'm going to get, and he just says, you can come again in 4 years. And that was it. That was absolutely it. But sometimes that's enough, isn't it?
Yeah. And what you're trying to achieve is the same message coming from a different place, from a different person sometimes, because we all have a voice that sometimes people get fed up with. We've heard it so many times. But if you can translate that same message in a different way with different people, it still has the same powerful effect. And that is the role and responsibility sometimes you get from good players, good people, good business leaders. You know, sometimes it is step back, let them get on with it, you've done your job. Just stepping back means you're a decent leader because you're allowing it to happen.
Because that also shows strength of character. I think a good leader with a strong sense of strength of character would have the confidence to enable their staff to get on with it and take on more responsibilities and empower people to do that. So for me, that's a sign of strength.
Absolutely. If you get the right people, let them go, let them grow, let them flourish, and you'll be surprised what they deliver.
The idea of EduCity and the concept of this with Sensible Soccer is to give those ideas, allow them to grow, allow them to take control, allow them to express themselves, to question, to answer, to find a way. And I think, in terms of what EduCity are trying to do and the students are trying to achieve, and also the teachers are trying to portray, is an interesting concept, and that's why Sensible Soccer wants to get involved in it and are really excited in it, because
there are three of the greatest
to them to learn.
Three of the greatest leaders in the world, arguably now, and more successful business people were, for want of a better term, geeky students at one point. And that was Jeff Bezos. I think he was a technology student, was he? You've got Steve Jobs and Bill Gates. And they all took a risk. And look where they are now. And someone has allowed them to do that. And they've come out of the education system, probably made certain mistakes, and it's not gone right for them the first 2-3 years, but carried on with that mindset and developed it and pushed it a little bit further. And look where they are now. 3 ex-students running the world.
Yeah, I mean, one of the other areas that you mentioned there that will be delved into is communication. It does all seem to string together. I mean, you're talking about decision making and then talking about you can't have decision making without communication either, can you? But how does communication overall fit in with this mindset?
Communication's a bi-directional thing. You give information, you receive information. Where we are today in this world, you've got digital technologies, we're talking to each other now. In the football world, you may do a presentation before you go out in terms of this is how we're going to play with the ball, this is how we're going to play without the ball. You can't leave it there because everyone's got different learning styles. There's no evidence to sort of suggest that people have a fixed learning style. So you might take one thing from the presentation, but then you might want to chat to Mick as the coach as you're walking out to the training ground. Or you might want an example of you doing it in your own past to reaffirm. And communication is an art. There are lots of communicators that might communicate by actions or body language.
I quite get where you're coming from there, because communication's a word. It's something that we all feel as though we do, and we do well, most of the time because we're talking. But I find communication sometimes silent as well. It's like saying nothing.
Well, Roy Keane's a classic. I was watching TV the other day with someone, and they said, Roy's going to blow here. Roy's going to blow. And he's not said a word. Yeah. But Roy's communicating.
But it is body language. You
audience.
touched on it. It is sometimes communicate. I mean, the best comedians sometimes get a laugh through saying nothing. Yeah. And that fascinates me, because sometimes just sitting with people and saying nothing is actually communicating an experience, because somebody's talking all the time. Are you listening? Are you communicating through body language? All these things you learn. You learn by being around people.
People talk about the silent treatment. You've probably done it with your children. Yeah. You've probably done it in a dressing room. You don't need to say anything. Because you know through your relationship that message will get across, and the person that you're conveying that message to also knows that what they've done is not acceptable and things must change. Yeah,
and it's also a skill to communicate, not with everybody. Not everybody wants to be communicated with, but some individuals do. But they are the conduit between you and the group. So you learn a skill of, who do I give information to? Who do I talk to? There might be one or two that you rely on to get your message indirectly or directly across in a way where you don't have to say anything. And that is a skill that I've had one of the best teachers of that, really, in Sir Alex Ferguson. There were times when he would stay silent and everybody was fearful of the next move because they were unsure, because they're all trying to anticipate what he's going to say, what he's going to do, but by doing nothing is actually bigger than doing something. Because everybody then goes off on one and starts to think, oh, he's too quiet, this isn't good, or sometimes he's too loud. But mainly when he was quiet, that became an issue. it became an issue. Somebody's going to feel it at some moment in time. And that can be during a game, at half time, or even after the game, you know, when you're coaching, when you're training, really, or being coached. It's just those subtle moments that experience gives you to communicate what you
It's
actually...
a relationship as well. There's a saying that you've 2 eyes, 2 ears, and use them.
Yeah.
It is, the message will only get across or be acted upon if you have a relationship with that person or group that you're communicating with.
And I think that helps decision making as well, because you're transferring decision making from you to somebody else to make, or you're giving them authority to do it. Yeah, the authority to do it, sort of thing. And the more of those you have in a group, you see the development of the group, and you see the outstanding qualities a group can have, and it does breed success. And then what you're doing then as a manager in sport or in business, you're allowing that to flow, and people feel comfortable accepting that because they have a voice and they have a way to deal with things without going to the boss all the time. You know?
I think for me it's being present. So even if you're silent, you are present in the communication that's going on. And then the other one is to really be aware of the different cultural differences in communicating, because for some people culturally may not be something that they have been so used to by speaking up or giving feedback. So being just very aware of how people communicate from their own cultures, I think will help you.
I have a great example of that in sport. We at one point, one season, we all dined together before a game and the evening of a game. And at one point at Manchester United, I think we had 17 different nationalities in the dining room the night before a game. Now, some of them could speak a little English, some of them spoke their own language, but you watch them communicate amongst themselves. It was football communication or sport communication, personality communication. But they weren't actually understanding what each was saying at times, but they were joining in. And it was intriguing just to watch them, actually, how they found a way to express themselves. And it is a cultural thing. It is getting to know that, you know, what is a nod? What is a shake of the head? What is a smile? What is, you know, your eye movements? Are you paying attention? Are you not? And it all comes differently. But common denominator is they're all in it together and in the same place at the same time, and they find a way. And it's fascinating that for me to see how that happens, because if you ask them a question, do you understand what I'm saying? Some of them don't. Yet they do understand. But then they'll say yes, I get it, through your body language and sort of the tone of your voice and things like that.
It's another big area, isn't it? And there's so much to go into in all of this, I think, with the growth mindset, communication. These are big topics. There's a lot to get into. But I hope today we've given you a taste here of what you can expect from the EdLeadS project and a leadership summit that's going to give people ideas and give them learning. But just to finish off, perhaps a thought from each of you on what, out of all these things we've talked about today, what things people should be expecting to get?
Be brave, get out your comfort zone, try something. There's nothing wrong with getting something wrong. The amount of things that I've got wrong, I've lost count of, but I've been successful and I'm successful now. And that, I think, is because you take a risk. It's a calculated risk. There's evidence behind it. They're not daft things, but get out your comfort zone, and you never know where it may take you. If you get something wrong, don't do it again, but learn from it. Question it.
For me, I would be saying to the people who are going to be with the EdLeadS program, it's to embrace the opportunity, because this is a perfect opportunity to learn from the best and to hear from the best about these experiences and these key themes. So I think that's what I would be saying, you know, embrace the opportunity, because that's for you to take forward and use for your own good.
Be open-minded for me, you know, have a real open mind that not everything you learn is in the classroom, not everything you learn is in a book, not everything you learn is online. I think it's about having an open mind to experience putting yourself into situations that you aren't comfortable with at times. You know, we talk about that comfort zone, but there are times when I'm a big one for ideas. I mean, ideas come into my head at ridiculous moments, not necessarily all the time, but when they come, I want to explore it a bit more, or I know somebody like Dave who will find out a little bit more for me. And then if it interests me enough, I'm open-minded enough to be able to go, I like that, I want a bit more depth to that, and I want to know a bit more about that, because that will come in handy when I'm in a situation that I know I'm going to be in as a coach, to be able to offer that advice. And that's all it really is at times. It's not the answer, it's advice. And are they open-minded enough to say, yeah, I like that, or I don't like that. That doesn't fit into my way of thinking, but I'm open-minded enough to accept. That's interesting. So I like people to be more open-minded than sort of closed on, this is the way to do it, because there is no specific way to do it. It's just a way you find of communicating, expressing yourself, having, you know, the knowledge, or finding a way to learn. You know, and as students, we're talking about students here, I think that's the reason why they want to be students, is to learn and to grow and then to apply it. I think that's the real interesting thing. And hopefully they can find a way to apply it later on, because they are the future and they're young enough. And I love youth. I love to see youth grow and mature. And, you know, it's a long time ago since I was youthful, but it just shows you that if you persevere and you're open-minded and you want to learn, you can achieve. You can achieve. And you can take the knocks along the way, because they are going to happen. It isn't a smooth ride. It never will be.
A lot of wisdom, a lot of thoughts, a lot of food for thought, and I think there'll be plenty of more of that down the line with this programme. So I hope it's whet your appetite for the rest of it, and thank you very much indeed for joining us, and thank you to all the guests here for their thoughts and their elaborations today.